Let's just get a quick look at what's happening in the Middle East. The latest there, Israel says it's checking the possibility that it killed Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar in Gaza. This happening in the last hour or so. However, Israel also saying that nothing is yet confirmed. Now, Sinwar is said to be a key figure in planning that horrific October 7th attack on Israel last year. Meanwhile, worries continue about an imminent attack by Israel on Iran. Iran has long backed Hezbollah in Lebanon and strengthened groups like Hamas in Gaza. Now, it's not very often that foreign policy tops the list of priorities for US voters, but Israel's year-long war in Gaza, as well as its intense bombing campaign in Lebanon, has meant it's an issue that cannot be ignored, especially for Muslim and Arab voters and Jewish voters alike. Let's take a closer look at all of this and how it's likely to impact the US presidential race. With us, of course, Abraham George. He is a chair with the Republican Party of Texas. Also with us is Amy Dacey. She is former Democratic National Committee CEO. And also joining us now is Rishi Iyengar. He is a staff writer at Foreign Policy magazine. Rishi, I need to ask you about what's happening right now in Israel. Israel looking at as to whether they've managed to kill Sinwar. What are you hearing on this front?
Yeah, it's obviously a very rapidly developing situation, and there's a lot of unknowns. But should this be the case, it'll obviously be a seismic development in the course of this conflict. We've seen things are literally changing day to day, even hour to hour. And it'll determine a lot about the Israeli response going forward. All the things you just mentioned, the conflict with Iran and with Hezbollah.
How, Rishi?
And also the US for that matter.
How exactly is it going to change the dynamic?
It's hard to say, but we were talking earlier about sort of the possibility of an escalating Israel-Iran conflict. Now that if this has come to pass and Sinwar is has in fact been killed, it kind of accomplishes, in some sense, one of the key goals of Israel's offensive in Gaza, which is to take out the senior leadership of Hamas. So I think the thing to watch out for is what comes next, who comes next, with regards to the Hamas leadership, and also how Israel responds going forward, whether they further escalate or whether something changes on that front in the conversation with the US as well.
All right. Amy, Abraham, I'm going to get you to jump in shortly, but Rishi, we've been hearing for days now of an imminent attack by Israel on Iran. When is, of course, the big question, and the bigger question, will it come before November 5th or after Election Day? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's again hard to telegraph exactly what Israel is thinking in terms of they've said it'll be swift and surprising, and so but there is a sense that they want to retaliate sooner rather than later, and it could well be before the election. But Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu also was quoted as saying recently that they will focus on, if they do so, they will focus on Iranian military targets, which is more limited than the initial conversation. And so I think the how and what of this retaliation is as important as the when, but the when, of course, matters and will have a significant impact.
It certainly does. Amy, what kind of a scenario are we looking at if this happens, say, before the election? The Middle East will be fresh in people's minds in a swing state, for example, like Michigan, where every vote matters. How would this play out? Because Michigan, of course, has been one of the largest, is one of the largest Muslim populations, has one of the largest Muslim populations in the country. And 4 years ago, Biden won Michigan thanks to strong support from American Arab voters and, of course, Muslim voters there.
Yes, well, this has obviously been an evolving situation. And as we hit the 1 year mark recently in October, things are changing and evolving as we move along. I think that the Biden administration has been very clear about their position on this and as they're moving forward. And again, I think that Vice President Harris has been very specific, especially in as recent as the September debate, saying she's for a two-state solution, safety for both Palestinians and Israelis to rebuild Gaza, and that Palestinians have security and self-determination and the dignity they deserve. So as we move forward, she's reached out to members of the community to talk to them, both in the Israeli community and the Palestinian community here in the United States. She's made those efforts to go to Michigan. And, I think her experience in the Senate and foreign policy as
Right.
somebody met with world leaders and whatnot, she'll bring that expertise. But this is evolving, and I think that I'm not going to get ahead of the Biden administration as they navigate this challenging situation in the Middle East.
Abraham, you've been very patient. A quick 30-second wrap before we move on.
Well, I'll be honest with you. If President Biden was in White House today, this wouldn't be happening. And American people know that. Muslim Americans understand one thing for sure. They do not want a war in the Middle East. And regardless of who is starting it, who is conducting it, it is bad for the region. It's bad for their families back home. And so they do not want a war. And if President Biden wanted to show some strength, he should have been doing that months ago, maybe a couple of years
Okay.
ago. Unfortunately, they don't have that. And that's one of the things that's going to be on the ballot in November here in the United States. Who can be a strong leader
Okay.
for the world? And President Trump is going to do that.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Abraham, Rishi, and Amy, thank you very much for your time here on US Election Watch.